Is one, because I thought I want to do it as pompous as possible, because and also it's a talking point.
Yeah.
People instantly ask me that. They're always like, "How do you say it? Heterogeneity, heterogeneity?" No one can really say it, and I'm like, "That's not a bad thing because it starts that conversation."
Yeah.
Whereas I could have just made a really simple title and just call it diverse or diversity, which cutting through it is what heterogeneity means. It's like the diversity of people, and the idea really is quite simple. I love, as we mentioned, I love fantasy. And particularly, I love mythology. I love fairy tales. I love mythology. I love theology. I find all that stuff absolutely fascinating because in every culture around the world, in every country, there is the conversation, or there is embedded in the culture, is spirituality, religion. Where do we come from? Is there higher purpose? Is there higher beings? I don't care where you go in the world, that is somewhere in there, and it's all traces through these stories we've been told, and we tell each other, and we continue. What's interesting is that we're at a point in life now where those conversations are almost quite taboo. You're not allowed to question things, or you're not meant to. It's seen as impolite, or you can offend someone, which I find, I guess in some ways that's quite unfortunate, that's quite sad, because the only way, by having those conversations that might be difficult and might be maybe uncomfortable, the only way to have those conversations, that you need to have those conversations in order to think things through and also share ideas. And perhaps, ideally, it's not about converting the other person, but it's about you maybe learning something new.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Melting Pot episode. Today, I have with me a very charismatic, I have to say, and a pretty accomplished actor who's not just done theater, but he's also done film and television. And I'm really excited to talk to him. So thank you so much for joining me today, Kayne. And the name is Kayne Harrison. So thank you, Kayne.
Thank you. Pleasure to meet you, Paul.
Likewise. Okay, Kayne. So let's start from the very, very beginning. And I have noticed that you've mentioned that storytelling has always been a passion for you. So is that what encouraged you into taking up acting, or there was something else that triggered you into getting into acting on a full-time basis? A little bit about your background would be great.
Yeah, so I come from what would be considered like a low socioeconomic background in the UK. So a lot of my time was spent playing outside in the streets and making up games with friends. I loved all that kind of stuff, and that then led me into I guess in many ways I lived in the fantasy world in my head. I always enjoyed that. So TV and films was a great thing. I loved that. And I had access to that. Whereas theatre wasn't accessible for quite a long period of time. It was always TV and film. So I grew up watching a lot of TV and films, and that storytelling really appealed to me. And I loved what you could do with it. And there's clear memories I have of knowing the power of a story, and one that always resonates with me because it was the one showed me very clearly that I wanted to do this as a profession, as well as the power of what a story can do, was a Denzel Washington film called Hurricane, which is a true story. And it's probably always been that way since, that true stories in particular have resonated with me when, because you get to, I guess it's like sometimes reading a book, but you get to hear the other person's story, or in the sense of a film or TV, see it, and they've lived a different life to you. And yet there might be similarities. There might be consequences in their life that you can resonate with, or experiences that you can resonate with. And yeah, that one in particular really hit me in the power of a story and the power of a performance and what you can do acting wise. And then also with the whole fantasy, I love the fantasy genre. So you give me like dragons and stuff like that. I love it. I love all that. And the thing is, I think sometimes people look down on fairy tales, but actually fairy tales, the history of them is really quite important. They build up lots of symbolism and mythology, and they've always got these kernels of truth in them and stories. And then you extrapolate that and you take that across to things on a bigger scale, such as Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and that world building. Those kind of stories and those mythologies that I find fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So all of that stuff is why I enjoy storytelling. And one of the strangest things people find odd about me is I've always enjoyed Shakespeare, which is very odd because where I come from, no one wanted Shakespeare.
So
No one.
you didn't study Shakespeare.
I studied it for a little bit in school. And when I say studied it, I'm using that very loosely, that term. With like maybe one English lesson, they maybe opened up probably Romeo and Juliet and we read. And I remember thinking, this is amazing. So I did that myself in the sense of I went and bought like Macbeth and I went and bought other plays. And my favorite one's Measure for Measure by Shakespeare. And I did the study myself at that young age and was just like, this is really interesting. And it wasn't easy to understand because the language is in many ways so far removed from
Yeah.
my own use of the English language and also at that stage. But it's a beautiful, I don't know, there's a beautiful way that language flows and the rhythms and the interpretations you can draw from it. And I find that kind of storytelling also extremely powerful. So, yeah, I hope that answers that question. That was quite a
No,
winded answer, I know.
it absolutely does. So
Right.
my take from it is that for you, storytelling was a lot to do with your imagination because that's the only way. And I think that's why fantasy and that's why fairy tales, because Shakespeare, okay, is different, but in terms of when you're a kid, when you don't have too much access, then you start to draw up all these images and in your head in order to like it's an imaginary world which then you hope that you can get into. No, I get that. I get that. So how did you then become an actor?
So it's been a very weird journey. The
Okay.
journey's still going on. It's a very unusual one. So basically, I trained in other professions and worked in other professions in the UK and like in different cities in the UK. And I always knew I wanted to get into acting. That was the thing. But coming from where I come from, how do you do that? How do you access that world? It felt so far removed from.
Yeah.
I managed to become an extra on set, and that was one of my first sort of insights into the industry. But being an extra, I did that a couple of times, and I realized this isn't quite the right part. I meant to be like over there. I meant to be, you need to bring the camera over here.
We have to swap.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
No, I think the cameraman's got it all wrong.
yeah, got it all wrong. He's got it
Yeah.
all wrong. I
Yeah.
just don't realize. So that was the first footsteps into the industry in many ways. And then that led also into voicing. I went to do voiceover work, and that was probably the biggest impact in getting an industry because it's through those kind of connections that I made and also the work that sort of built up a bit of a name and got me involved in other aspects that eventually through time opened up the door for acting. But it was very difficult. I had to try and get an agent. As you do, you have to get an agent. That's mandatory in many ways. You
Yeah.
need someone to represent you. But and I people think I'm exaggerating, but I'm not exaggerating when I tell you I knocked on every door. I wrote letters, hand delivered them. I emailed, I phone called. I really hustled in London to get an agent. Couldn't get one. Just could not get one. So it took a long time to the point of at a point I created a fake agent in order to get my first set of jobs, particularly in some voiceover work. That is what had to be done because you have to sometimes think outside the box.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, how did you land your first role? Was it television or was it film?
So the first one, I always count it as my first one because it really was the first proper one. So not including the stuff with doing extra work because I was an extra on The Dark Knight Rises, but I don't count that as the first role for me was Resort to Love, which was the Netflix film that came out a few years ago, 2021, I think it was. That really was the first. How I got that is still a bit of a mystery and a weird one because no one will ever tell me, and it's very peculiar. And also, it's that combination of being very lucky, but being in the right place at the right time, as well as being prepared. It's all these elements that are combined together. So 2021, as you might remember, was the height of the pandemic of COVID.
Yeah.
So everyone was locked down, as it were. And in the UK, we were locked down. And in that period of time, a few months before I got asked to do an audition. A friend of mine in South Africa who's an actor, a stuntman, he and I, we wrote a screenplay. You had a bit of time on your hands because it was COVID. So we wrote a screenplay and he said, I'm going to submit it to my agent. I was like, cool. And he sent it to his agent. She loved it. She was in South Africa. And we had a video call with her. And we had a little chat. And she was like, see what she can do. Da, 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 love it. Great. That was it. Fast forward a few months later, I get this call and see it's a South African number. And it's Susie, which is the agent, my mate's agent at the time. And she says, something's come across my desk and they want you to tape for it. And I thought, what? I'm going to send you this script. I was like, okay, send me this script. And it said Netflix Untitled Project by Alicia Keys. And I remember thinking to myself, what, the Alicia Keys? Like, the girl is on fire, Alicia Keys, New York City, Alicia Keys. And it was. And I remember calling Susie back and saying, look, I think you've made a mistake. They obviously don't want me. And she said, no, you've been asked to tape. Your name's come up. And it was from these producers in New York and LA. So I taped, and it was a self-tape, obviously. I did that in my living room during COVID. And it's still to the day probably one of the smoothest transitions in many ways of taping to getting the job. It was only a few days later, I got a call from the director saying, yeah, you got the job. You fly out to Mauritius in a few days. And
Wow.
that was my first kind of, I would say, proper gig because it was Netflix. I was with Christina Milian, who was in it, Jay, Sinqua. I had a really good cast. It was a very nice, easy to watch romantic comedy. I had a good role in it. And I remember the table read we had, which again, we were all in different countries. So I was the only one in the UK, but the other guys were all in the States. And then there was a cast member in South Africa as well. So we did the table read via Zoom. And I remember looking at this table and seeing these names and seeing these faces and thinking, oh, and just trying to be careful that imposter syndrome didn't take over. And yeah, that was a great experience. And then, yeah, a few days after that table read, I got flown out to Mauritius and we shot Resort to Love. So that was the first, that was the beginning of things. And bearing in mind, I didn't have an agent. So Susie wasn't my agent. She had to represent me for that deal. She wasn't my agent. That's how bananas that whole situation is.
There has to be, yeah, it's when it needs to happen, it just happens. It finds a natural way of happening. And for you, that's what it was. And it's a bizarre story, but it is reality. And that's what kickstarted your career. So, how you, before we go into more details about your career, you mentioned about tape auditioning. And
Mm.
I am very curious to know how, because earlier no one, you had to go into the studio or the wherever it was, and you had to be there in person in order to do the audition. But now I guess because of streaming platforms and because there's a lot more stuff happening, taping your audition and doing virtual auditions has become a thing. So how do you think that shift, has it helped actors or made it even more competitive? Because now it's so easy to say, okay, I'm just going to be at home or wherever and I'll just do an audition and I will send it off. So there are far more auditions coming in as a result of that. So what is your take on it in terms of,
I would say, like many things, there's the pros and the cons, right? There's always a good side, there's always a bad side. I have to be honest, without the self-tape becoming a thing, I wouldn't have got Resort to Love. So there's a massive pro for me because I could be wrong. I just can't imagine I would have been called in London to go and tape in person, to go and audition in person. I don't know. Maybe I would have. Who knows? But that tape situation allowed me to get that role. So it worked for me. So there's absolute pros in it. It does help with time instead of you racing around London trying to get from one to the other. It helps with time. However, you also have the flip side of that is with some of my friends, they are such perfectionists. It doesn't help with time because they're
okay,
sitting there taping themselves and then they're now editing that tape and they're really pulling their performance apart in a way that you wouldn't be able to do if you just did it in the room and you left it in the room.
yeah,
So that's one of the downsides. if you're not able to be almost a bit removed from your performance when you have to edit it and then send the tape in, then I think you can get yourself in a bit of a, as I like to say, a bit of a pickle.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So that's and it is like
Because
a new
then how do
discipline.
you know what's perfect? And how do you know what the person at the other end is going to, or what that person really is looking for? There's no way of knowing. And then you're absolutely right. Yeah. So for you, it worked. And is it something that you continue to do now, or now you just get, you don't even need auditions? It's
So
a
I get a combination of the two.
combination.
I wish I didn't need auditions. I'm not Samuel L. Jackson level. I'm not at that level. He just gets a call and just turns up. Maybe one day. No, to be fair, I don't mind auditioning because for me, it's more practice in many ways. But I get a combination of the two. So I still get self tapes, but I still go in person. So like today, after this, I've got two in-person auditions. So I'll be in London doing that. Whereas yesterday it was a self-tape. So it does alternate. Either doesn't bother me. I just go with it. I don't mind if it's self-tape or it's in person. So Resort to Love was self-tape, but the night in, that was an in-person and I got both of those. So it really depends. The challenges with any of this stuff is when you're trying to guess what they want the other side of the table or the other side of the screen, if you're trying to guess what they want and you're constantly second guessing yourself, that's where difficulty comes in, whether it's a tape or if it's an in-person audition.
Yeah.
You're just trying to fix their problem, but you don't really quite know what the problem is.
Yeah, correct. Correct. Yeah. You mentioned Night In. I was going to ask you about it later, but now the fact that you mentioned it,
Sorry.
let's just no, that's fine. That's fine. That's what a conversation flow means, right? That one thing leads to another. So the film is not released as yet, right?
Yes. No, that's
Um,
correct. Yeah.
and
There's a screening at the end of the month for cast and crew, and then I'm not sure when it's being released. They're in the selling process at the moment, which is above my pay grade.
And yeah, and why do you want to get into the hassle of it anyways? Would you like to talk a little bit about the film, or it's currently under wraps, not until the screening?
Yeah, it's a British independent feature film, which is really nice. It was a really good one to do. What is really interesting is there's us as the cast, and we're all leads in it as the three main cast members. But the irony is the crew are really the biggest talent in this thing because the crew have all worked on the biggest stuff you can imagine, from James Bond to like the Marvel franchise to Indiana Jones, Star Wars. They were all really seasoned professionals, as it were. So they were like the bigger talent, which is quite interesting. But it's a great film. So it's a British independent film. They financed it all themselves. We shot it in, I think it was 6 weeks shoot. It was just a great experience because it was a lead role. So the level of discipline you need and the stamina was completely different to what I'd done before. It was a completely different genre I'd done before, which I enjoyed, which is it's a kind of thriller slash horror, but it has these very strong dark comedy moments. And I provide the dark comedy. And I've never really been able to do that. And it was the first time. That's what makes it very interesting for me. Well, and also why I really want it to come out and people to see it. It was the first time I got to use my British accent. I never get to use my British accent. I'm always cast as an American because I'm British American, but I always get cast American. And I was very adamant that I got to use the British accent, and I got to. So I was very happy with that. It's slightly more heightened, the accent, I would say, in the sense of a bit more London in certain places, but it was just the opportunity to use the British accent. So it's a very, it's a fun film, I think. It's got scary moments because it's got a thriller horror aspect, but it was a great fun film to shoot. We got this incredible opportunity, which is very rare. We got 1 week's rehearsal which never happens. Like on a film, you never get rehearsal. So that was great. And that was like theatre in many ways, where you got to sit. We got to talk about the characters, the motivations, where we're going to be, what we're doing, and tweaks and things like that with language and dialogue. So that was a great moment. And yeah, I'm really excited for people to see it. Did I send you the poster? I know the director, Mark, sent me the provisional
Yeah,
poster.
you
You
sent me
got
the
that, yeah.
poster. Yeah.
You get an idea. It's quite like bright and
Yeah.
neon.
Yeah. No, that
Uh,
should be
and
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it should be a funny one. And the character, I don't know if you have this or if you've seen this. There was a series in the UK that was very popular called The In-Betweeners. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or seen
I
it.
no, I haven't. No.
So it's a Channel 4 series, and then they made a couple of movies. It probably wouldn't be allowed to be on TV anymore. I don't know. It's very funny. That very typical British humor,
You're
but
right.
quite filthy as well. So
Okay.
it's quite filthy. It's basically set in a high school. It's exactly how boys talked in high school, to be honest. But it was very funny. And I there's a character in there called Jay, played by James Buckley. And I decided early on when I got the script, as part of my process when you're studying it, I got the script and I knew my character who's called Zach. I made this decision. I was like, this is going to work. He is going to be in this sort of fictional reality world because again, I live in fantasy. He is going to be the cousin to Jay's character in between us, and I decided that, and so that's how I was able to lift nuances and think, oh, they're going to be the same family, and that he says that with so much confidence, and this guy's going to say that with so much confidence. There's all that bravado, but actually no follow through. It's a lot of that. He's Zach is that character, which very much mirrors Jay's character. That's what I decided. So in my head, there's a loose connection between the night in and in betweeners.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about your process. So when you get offered a script, what, and then we'll talk about theater because I'm very curious about that aspect of your life as well, your career. What is your process when you get a script? Like, how do you get into the character?
So I always feel like these kind of questions are like the Wizard of Oz one, where you're looking behind the curtain and you actually really don't want to know because it's so boring.
It
So what
can't be
I share,
boring. Yeah, it can't be boring.
in many ways, it probably is for someone else. If you were watching it, it would be very boring. I love it. I really enjoy it. In all honesty, if we take the night in, a lot of that is just me sitting in that chair there and reading the script. You've got everything you need is in the script. Really, everything you need is in the script, and you can build around that. So you use the script almost like a foundation or a Bible, and then you can build whatever you need. So you do hear of people saying, "I will build the backstory, and I'll build the story of how we got to this point, and I'll decide what it is afterwards." And it's similar to that. I use the script. I use that as my foundation. So a lot of it is, if you take the very obvious thing of getting the lines in your head, that is just repetition. It's just drilling them in. It's no different to a like training in the gym or training playing tennis, and you got to get that backstroke right. It's all the same. It's repetition, repetition. So you read, well, I do. I read that script 100 times easily across a period of time, just reading and reading. And then I'll go into more of a study of the script, which is slightly different. And it's me figuring out why maybe that's happening that way or why the character's doing that way. And it all happens a bit naturally for me in that sense. I don't try and force anything too much, but I come up with ideas. And if I get ideas, I write them in like the margins or I write them on a scrap of paper. I get a lot of stuff pop in my head when I'm like on trains. I find that for whatever reason, being on a train really helps my mind suddenly come up with more things. So a lot of it is just building ideas. And then from that, with the script, you're building the character and you're building ideas. And then you can present that to the directors or the director when you get to set. But a lot of it, I'm sorry to say, is quite boring. It's just sitting in a chair and reading.
And that particular chair.
And that particular,
And
it is
that
that particular chair.
particular.
That is a very comfortable chair, and that is where it goes.
So has there been ever a time when you've been on set, you're being filmed, it's action, you've done something very impromptu, and it's actually gotten into the final cut of the film? Has that ever happened to you?
Only on small things, not on films. I've had it in the odd thing in a commercial, I've noticed. There is one thing I'm tempted to see if it comes in, or I want to see if it comes in, is in the night in we got to do, there was moments where we were allowed to do improv and we were allowed to mess around with the language. And myself particularly, I did try to mess around with the language a little bit because my character was like that. So I thought I'm going to take liberties and try things. But there was one thing that happened in a scene with one of my co-stars. It was this glass, it was full of liquid. And anyway, we were messing around with some Tabasco sauce and it splashed right into my eye, this Tabasco sauce, directly in my eye. And the
Oh my
camera's
God.
on me. And we're on a close-up shot and it went right
Oh
in
my
my
God.
eye.
Oh my God.
Not by accident.
Dancer. Oh my
And I
God.
remember being like this. I was like, and
And you said,
I held it as long as I could, and then I went, I've got to go.
so
I'm interested.
that was the horror part of your
Yeah, I'll tell
character.
you what, that was horrible. That was because it was such a shock. It was not meant to
Yeah,
happen.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
very interested to see if that gets put into the final cut because the look on my face would have been horrendous. So yeah, but no, there's nothing I can think of in particular. I know of where we've done improv and it's got in. Maybe in the odd commercial, I've seen little bits. I remember thinking, oh, that was an odd take. That was something that we did wrong. But that's the one I'm very interested to see if the Tabasco sauce in the eye did to the night in.
Okay, we shall. I'm also going to be waiting for that when I watch the film eventually.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
you've done a 7-minute short film,
Mm.
which you've written, directed, I think
So
you
so it was with my
acted.
yeah. So with three one of the mates, one of the guys in it, Nathan, who's Spanish British, he directed that one. He directed
Oh,
it.
okay. Okay. And so firstly, what's the name of the film? I know I watched it because
Okay, yeah.
you shared it with me, but the name is a bit of a tongue twister, so I'm not even going to attempt. This was very cleverly trying to ask you,
I
but
like that.
and so yeah, and what kind of encouraged you? Because it's very I mean, I had to watch it twice before I really got the gist of what it was all about. So, what encouraged you to write it? You didn't direct it, but you wrote and acted in it, right?
Mm.
And it's just 7 minutes.
Yeah, so it was the three of us. So it was Nathan, Jack, and myself, all actors, and between us, we've all got the skill sets to do something. So both those guys also shoot for other clients. So they shoot for brands and things like that, videography. And I can write. I've always written and I've written scripts and things like that for brands, commercials, plays, podcasts, etc. So between the three of us and being actors, we just basically said we could do something. So let's do it. We were a bit bored at the time. So I wrote something. I had this idea anyway in my head. So the title is called Heterogeneity.
Thank you.
The reason I did that as well is one, because I thought I want to do it as pompous as possible, because, and also it's a talking point.
Yeah,
People instantly ask me that. They're always like, how do you say it? Heterogeneity, no one can really say it. And I'm like, that's not a bad thing because it starts that conversation.
yeah,
Whereas I could have just made a really simple title and just call it diverse or diversity, which cutting through it is what heterogeneity means. It's like the diversity of people. And the idea really is quite simple. I love, as we mentioned, I love fantasy. And particularly, I love mythology. I love fairy tales. I love mythology. I love theology. I find all that stuff absolutely fascinating because in every culture around the world, in every country, there is the conversation, or there is embedded in the culture, is spirituality, religion. Where do
yeah,
we come from? Is there higher purpose? Is there higher beings? I don't care where you go in the world, that is somewhere in there. And it's all traces through these stories we've been told and we tell each other and we continue. What's interesting is that we're at a point in in life now where those conversations are almost quite taboo. You're not allowed to question things, or you're not meant to. It's seen as impolite, or you can offend someone, which I find, I guess in some ways that's quite unfortunate. That's quite sad because the only way, by having those conversations that might be difficult and might be maybe uncomfortable, the only way to have those conversations, that you need to have those conversations in order to think things through and also share ideas. And perhaps ideally, it's not about converting the other person, but it's about you maybe learning something new
yeah,
or learning about what your friend thinks. So it's not about shouting over each other or trying to make sure you win and you do this whole, yeah, see, I got you. I know I get you. It's none of that. It's the sharing of ideas. And I've noticed, particularly because I go from set to set in the industry I'm in, people are afraid to share ideas. And I find that not a good thing. So that kind of started this idea. And it's a combination of asking those questions about spirituality, morality, and then the little cliffhanger at the end of criminality
yeah.
and who is right, who is wrong. And I basically thought, what I'm going to do is we had no money to shoot. This cost nothing apart from the price of three coffees, which I paid for. So they still owe me three coffees. And we parked up in Ealing in West London. It was just us. We fixed the cameras. And I thought, I've got to make this as cheap to shoot as possible. So fix this in a car. So it's all in a car. And it's basically, I just thought, let's just do it's an atheist, a theist, and an agnostic.
Yeah,
So it's three guys in a car with three completely different opinions.
yeah,
And the idea is they don't have an argument, they discuss it. Each one gets to get their point across, and they maybe learn something new. And then you've got the cliffhanger at the end. That is where it started from. The interesting thing is, we got it at some festivals, and that was what was really nice to see because I sent it to a couple of friends in the industry who are like directors and actors, and they thought it was great. They thought that was a really interesting take. I got some lovely compliments, which I always like to. I always like to drop this because I this was quite, this surprised me. Like it gave me Tarantino vibes, and I was like, whoa, like I'll take it. I'll take that. But yeah, it was the festivals was very interesting because it started a lot of conversations. So Jack and I went to one, and we had so many people coming up to us afterwards discussing these kind of big questions and also what was going to happen next. And then that's now led to us. We've actually now submitted that, or my agent has submitted that to commissioners as a TV series because I've written more, and I believe we can build it out into a full TV series of 8 episodes quite easily. And I've written it, and my agent yesterday has submitted it to a couple of different companies. There's one company in particular I really would love to work with. A guy called Ash runs it at Rough Cut, and yeah, that's the idea, is that we can
That's
maybe get
amazing.
it on TV as a series.
Wow, that'll be incredible. Yeah. And that's moving to like from acting to script writing to moving in a different direction. And in the industry, there's so many possibilities and there's so many different avenues to explore within the industry itself, because the industry includes television, film, and theater. So tell me a little bit about your theater experience and where has that taken you? What's next for you, if there is anything that is coming up soon for you?
Yeah, so my theatre stuff is, I guess in many ways, my theatre stuff is much more limited than my film and TV. And that's not necessarily by design, it's just worked out that way. So I've done smaller theatre things. And my goal, I've been talking to my agent about this, my goal is to do more theatre. I've applied to the RSC, I don't know how many times, but they will not take me. So I don't know why. We'll get there one day. So the goal is I do want to get involved more in theatre. Absolutely. So we are looking at various companies and productions that are going to start. So I'm hoping the future is going to involve more theatre. I'd love to do some stuff on the West End. One of my friends had his debut on the West End not long ago, and I went to see it, and it was fantastic. And like I said, I've not had that privilege yet of West End. Mine's been much smaller productions that only run for a few days or a couple of weeks. But yeah, the big West End, Broadway would be amazing as well, to
Yeah,
be
of
honest.
course.
Anything like
Yeah.
that.
And
I know
given the
what.
fact that Shakespeare has been with you since your childhood, I think the natural progression is, of course, to not necessarily do Shakespearean theater, but West End and Broadway. Yeah, would be incredible.
I
So,
would
I mean,
love to do
yeah.
RSC. Yeah, I'd love to join the RSC for a period and do my go-to would be Measure for Measure by Shakespeare. I think that's
Oh,
because
yeah, because you
so
said that's your, yeah,
it's
yeah,
so current now. It seems to not be. It doesn't seem to age, in my opinion.
correct.
So yeah. So if RSC are listening, give me a call.
Yeah, no, but I think it's been interesting listening to how you got your first role, listening to, and I think that's where I could talk to you for hours, but of course I sadly can't. But just for young people who are now looking at getting into theater, what do you think? Not theater, sorry, into film and television, or getting into the industry in general, what would you recommend for them to do? Because people, it's such a competitive industry that people get disheartened because they try for years, in fact, in some cases. So, what do you think would be an interesting way or for people to try? And one is you have to encourage them to not get disheartened. So, what would you say to that? And two is just any tips that you could share.
So the tips I would share for trying to get into it, and I want to emphasize trying because it is very hard. So don't be naive about it. It's extremely difficult. That being said, there are things you can do to aid your journey. And all of the tips the only tips I can give you really are things that I've done and that I've seen work and perhaps from others that I know have done. So I guess they resonate for anyone, except obviously if you've got connections to the industry, it's going to be a completely different journey if you've got connections. So I'm probably talking predominantly to those similar background to myself or from a working class background where you have really no connection to it. There's a couple of things that you can do. You have to do a lot of outside the box thinking, but the key thing is write something. And this is, if I'm being honest, write something, write a short. You can even write what they call super shorts now, where they're under 2 minutes or something. Write a short, write something you think is good, write something that you think you would want to act in, or a character you would want to play. Write something, get a couple of mates together, try and ideally try and network with other actors. I would say actors are quite easy to find, so it shouldn't be too difficult to find a couple of actors, a couple of mates, or turn them into mates and be like, look, you're not busy, I'm not busy. Let's and try and figure out who can do some filming, or like we did, just figure out how you're going to film something. So first of all, you write something, make it easy and easy to shoot. So again, you have to put all these things in your favor. So when we shot Heterogeneity, we've got no money, we got no assistants, no producers, none of that. So we've got to do it. So how do you do that? Fix it in one location. So we borrowed Nathan's girlfriend's car. You call in these kind of favors, right? So you fix everything in one location and shoot something. Do it a bit like a play. Figure out how you're going to shoot it, and then start pushing that out to friends, put it onto your social media. Maybe look at submitting to festivals, find the ones that are free in different countries. There's free festivals, you haven't got to pay for them. Where possible, don't pay for them because most of that isn't going to really go anywhere other than
Yeah.
just getting a rejection. So try and find the free ones where you can. And they're practical things you can do. That also gives you effectively a show reel or part of like your CV for when you're trying to reach out to agents and you're trying to get casting directors to look at you and you're trying to get onto various platforms that you have to be on to submit for roles. So go and do your own thing if you where possible. There's obviously practical things. There might be local theatre companies around you. In the UK, we still have quite a few of them. So go and knock on their door, find out who's running it, find out who the creative director is, see if you can get in touch with them, write them a nice letter, show them you're eager. Try
Yeah.
that. How do you stay? Was it? How do you stay positive? Was it? How do you
Yeah.
say?
How do you say positive? Yes.
Easier said than done, that one. But I would say one of the one of the things I find is in helping me stay positive is trying to stay busy, because I find if you're not busy, sometimes that's when more doubts and things creep in. So the way you can do that is try and do things that will enhance your skill set and your craft. Okay. So you want to work on the craft. A lot of that, which it amazes me, the amount of actors I know that don't do this. And so if you think about it, if you do it, you're just getting a 1% improvement on them. And hopefully that 1% improvement is going to make you stand out when you get that audition. Read. The amount of actors I know that don't read books. And the reason that's really important, and read plays. The reason that's really important is because there'll come a point where you'll start getting scripts. Hopefully you get to a certain point in your career and you start getting scripts. If you've got a good understanding or a bit of a back catalogue of various plays, of storytelling, you will know good writing from bad writing very quickly.
Hmm.
You will get a bit of an insight into what's going to work and what's not. And that being said, I think it helps. Some people say it's not essential, and that's fine, but I think it aids. Is watch films, watch other performers, see what they've done, figure out what they've done from that character to that character. What are the nuances? What are the changes? And also, there's very different. An actor like Gary Oldman is very different compared to an actor, say, like a Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Now, wasn't Tom Cruise is a fantastic actor, but obviously he's probably more known as almost a stuntman these days because of the stunts
Yeah.
he does.
Yeah.
But because he's what you would call movie star, kind of himself in many ways. Slight nuances, but the character's predominantly always Tom Cruise in many ways. Whereas you take someone like Gary Oldman, if you look at the characters, he's what they call a character actor.
Yeah.
Very different. And that can help you understand of what you want to do, maybe, because some people want to be more a movie star style actor, like a Bruce Willis or a Will Smith or Tom Cruise, or you might want to be someone more like a Gary Oldman, even maybe someone like a Tom Hardy, where the nuances change. Even Denzel, especially his early stuff, very different range of characters. Watch those performances, study them. It's not just like watching them for entertainment purposes, because I don't even do that most of the time. I will watch them differently, I will study them. One thing that massively helps me, this is a little insight into what I do a lot. What I love to watch is documentaries.
Yeah.
Documentaries of watching people in various situations is very helpful, I find. I can't quite articulate why that is, but there's something about it. If it's a certain documentary with a topic that might be unsettling or like a mystery that's happened or crime or something, watching some of these people, there's
Because it's
nuances the camera
real. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's real. Yeah, yeah,
Sometimes it's uncomfortable. You can see the
yeah,
person in a bit of discomfort because they're almost trying to perform, but their body's giving them away. It's
yeah,
very, I find that stuff very helpful. Like I said, it's, I would say the reading, the viewing, the watching, use all that as studying as almost your own school to help educate yourself and try and make things happen by writing and filming your own stuff.
yeah. So a lot of research, a lot of studying, a lot of detailing, a lot of introspection, a lot of understanding of different characters. I mean, all of that put together. Yeah. So that could be the first step. And then when you feel prepared, then you can start to approach people. And the key is to stay positive always. So I think don't give up, because I think anything in life, you don't get things on a platter. There are very few people who are lucky enough to be able to get things on a platter. Even you, from your background to where you are today, is a true example of how nothing is impossible, but you
Hmm.
just have to try and make the effort. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Kayne. I've really enjoyed chatting with
Oh,
you.
no, thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you. And thank you for your comment earlier. Can I tell them that I
Yeah.
look like the guy from Emily in Paris? I didn't know this, so thank you. So yeah, if he ever gets recast, I'm your man.
Yeah, no, I genuinely meant it, because that was my first reaction when your agent or your PR
As a
agency,
PR,
whoever,
yeah.
yeah, the PR, when they sent me your profile and said that I think you would be a perfect fit for my show. And I looked at you and I went, really? So,
Were you bitterly disappointed when I wasn't
no,
Lucy? You're like,
no,
oh no, it's the
not at
wrong
all.
guy. I've made a terrible mistake. What have I done?
Not at all. No, I knew this was going to be an absolutely fun conversation.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. And good luck with whatever's coming for you next, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot. I'm sure there's going to be West End and Broadway. And yeah, and I'm sure this is all manifestation and positive
Love it.
thinking.
Love
I'm
that.
sure there's going to be a lot of good films after the one that's going to be releasing soon. And yeah, and I'd be happy to have another conversation with you sometime next
Absolutely.
year with all the interesting other aspects and new aspects of what you may have done. So thank you once again.